be a vegetarian means to reduce your karma by a factor of maybe hundreds and hundreds of times. To go from taking as your sustenance highly evolved living beings with blood flowing through their veins, with highly evolved nervous systems who scream in pain and agony and try and protect and preserve their lives in the same way we would, to go from that level of bloodletting and pain and violence to go to the level of eating cauliflowers and apples and oranges and harvesting grains is a huge drop in your karmic liability. George Bernard Shaw says, while our bodies are the living graves of murdered animals, how can we expect any ideal conditions on earth? This is part of a longer poem where he says, we go on Sundays to pray for peace, and yet our bodies are the graves of murdered beasts, you see. How cruelty begets its offspring, war. There's a karmic connection between ingesting the flesh of animals, which they do not willingly give up so that we can enjoy the luxury of eating them. There's a connection between that and the violence that we see in war. If we ask ourselves, what is the ultimate cause of suffering? Why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? Every day there's some enjoyments and there's some suffering. What is the cause of the enjoyments in my life? What is the cause of the sufferings? Now, if we bring into the equation the principle of karma, we conclude, it's not rocket science, that the cause of my suffering is a suffering that I have caused to other living beings. And even human beings have a sense of this. Most people have a sense of this, but they only limit it to other human beings. There's some validity there, but the point is that it's not just the human beings. We're not the only ones that feel pain. And it's not only by hurting human beings that you get a reaction. You get reactions also from hurting animals. It's not necessary. In the Bible it says, he who killeth an ox, it is as if they killed a man. It's a fact that meat-eating reduces respect for all kinds of life, including that of humans. One argument often used is, why are you bleeding hearts wasting so much compassion on the animals? Don't we have enough violence in human society to worry about before we worry about the animals? But it starts with how we treat the animals. Jesus Christ said, whatever you do to the least of them, you do to me. Even whatever you do to the ant or the sparrow, you do to me, because they're all sons and daughters of God. They're all creatures of God. If a father has 10 sons and one has Down syndrome and the other 9 are doctors or lawyers, he loves the Down syndrome child as much as the doctors and lawyers. It's not that the doctors and lawyers have a greater right to live than the Down syndrome child. He wants equal rights for all of them. Pythagoras is known as a mathematician, but he was a lot more than that. It's interesting when you read the life story of Pythagoras. We just know the Pythagorean theorem. But he was a lot more than a mathematician. He was a vegetarian. You have Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. He was the guru of Plato, and he'd been to India. So he was actually the mentor of Plato, who was the mentor of Socrates, who was the mentor of Aristotle. And he was a vegetarian. He says those that kill animals to eat their flesh tend to massacre their own. All of our actions, including our choice of food, have karmic consequences. By inflicting injury, pain, and death, one must in the future experience the sufferings caused. There's a principle, a karmic principle, what goes around comes around. But the reactions to a cruel deed today may take years. It may even take a lifetime before you get the reaction. Prabhupada says, by killing animals, not only will we be bereft of the human form of life, but we will have to take an animal form and some or other be killed by the same type of animal we have killed. That is the law of nature. The Lord doesn't take any pleasure in inflicting punishment on us. He would rather we, by internal introspection or discussion with others or consulting with the scriptures, He would rather that we, of our own, come to a higher level of consciousness and sensitivity and leave off the base barbaric practice of slaughtering animals. And if that's the case, if we do that, if we come to that level of conscience, then the punishment is no longer necessary. The punishment is only remedial. It's not gratuitous. So if you somehow or other relinquish the practice on your own, then the punishment that was scheduled for you becomes reduced by a great factor. Instead of getting stabbed in the back, maybe just stick, you get a pinprick on your finger or something like that. So that's actually why the Lord arranges such a things as to have a delayed reaction. So we'll just read this, and that should conclude